So I found a general issue with sporks is that they tend not to have a long enough handle for me to actually eat food out of, say, an MRE or a trail pack food kit, and I end up needing to fold over the packet in order to reach the food at the bottom. So I've decided to make myself a spork with a long enough handle that I can actually reach the food, and in the process I'm going to show you the knife that I'm going to do it with is this BK62, the Becker Kephart knife, designed by Horace Kephart himself, considered the father of bushcraft initially, and I'm going to take you some of the things that I like and dislike about this knife. I'm Clarice, welcome to the Live Ready channel. This is a fixed blade, full tang knife. You can see the stock metal runs all the way through. It's got a beautiful walnut handle, originally designed by Horace Kephart. As I said, today they are produced by Carve. Mr. Ethan Becker got his hands on one of these many years ago, and he put them back into production, and we are very grateful for that today. This is really a stunning piece of equipment to have. So like I said, I have a really hard time finding a spork that is long enough at the handle for me to actually be able to eat with it. So I'm going to use this little piece of wood to carve myself a new spork. Let's see here. So there is a fault line in here, and I'm just going to take that out so that I don't end up carving right into it. And now this is a high carbon steel blade. There's about 1.1% carbon in this blade. It's very comparable to a Mora carbon garbage, but it is a 1095 Carve steel, and the difference between the 1095 Carve steel and the 1095 steel is that they've added a bit more vanadium, molybdenum and nitrogen, which makes it a bit harder, but you do sacrifice because the blade is more brittle and more likely to break or chip than, say, a Kudeman 299B is with its stainless steel. But it is a really tough knife, and don't get me wrong, I'm going to put it through its paces. Because it is a high carbon steel, it will pick up a little bit of patina over time. You can see it's got a wonderful stone wash blade. It looks beautiful, but it will pick up, you can see like over there are some spots it looks like, okay, that is just a bit dirty from working with it. But it does pick up a bit of patina, especially from cutting fruit or cutting wood or pieces of bark or whatever. There's some juice and stuff in there that will change the color over time. So in making a spork, I want to remove the pith, the center pith here, because it is a weak point. I do see some fine cracks, so there is a chance that it might actually end up breaking, but we will have to work with that and see how we go. Now, something that I can't do with my Mueller Bison that I can do with this knife is I can do a bit of planing with it. The Mueller Bison just has such a small little blade that it's just not practical to plane with. Whereas this, with its 13.5 centimeter blade, makes it quite easy for me to do that. And something that I can really attest to is how sharp this knife came out of the box. And it was sent to me by Marine SHTF. Go and check out that YouTube channel. I'll link his channel here. And it's a wonderful gift. Thank you so much once again. So now I've removed all of the center pith. I've cut down the edges here because it's quite hard on my hand. And I'm just going to plane this down a little bit to get a little step into my spork. The wood that I'm working with is an olive wood, and I like to carve with olive wood even though it is such a hard wood, and because it's beautiful and it adds a little bit of strength to my project. So I don't need to go and fire harden this afterwards unless I really want to. So olive wood, to give you an idea on the Yankee scale, is around 2,700 pound force. It's just a bit more than twice what yellow birch is, which comes in at I think about 1 to 60 pound force. So it's really a hard wood to work with. So now I come to the part where I have to create the bowl of the spoon, which is really actually quite a trick if you don't have a crook knife. But because this blade has a spear point tip, I can capitalize on that curve on the edge there. I'm going to baton it in here just to give myself a nice little cross section that I can carve to. I'm going to just take off a little bit of bark. This, by the way, does not have a 90-degree spine on it, which I don't think was an issue in the day of Horace Kephart. They didn't really have ferro rods that they needed to work with, and he would have designed this knife pretty much around this kind of function: carving staff, utility knife, being able to hunt or skin, using it to make different things, cutting rope, campsite or woodsman sort of applications. So let's see. Now I don't have a crook knife, as I said, so I'm just going to baton a stop cut in there for myself. Because this wood is so hard, it's actually not easy to do these things by hand. That's why I'm batoning it in. And now you can see I've got a little stop cut over there that I can carve towards. And once again, just capitalizing on that edge, that spear tip edge, and that little curve there, I'm going to carve towards my stop cut now. Okay, so I am literally just using that edge as a fulcrum and going around, just hollowing out what I can. It's not going to be a deep spoon like you would get from using a crook knife, but it is going to give you a little bit of a hollow there. So you can see there is a slight dip there now. So now I want to just round my edges here, and I've got to make my handle a little bit narrower and even out this edge here. So we're going to take off quite a bit of this material. Because this knife has got a flat grind, it doesn't quite bite into the wood as a knife with a Scandi grind would do. So I've got to apply quite a bit of force to get it to take off that wood, whereas with a Scandi grind it would bite in quite hard. Otherwise the knife tends to slip and glance off of the wood, but it still works pretty well. I'm going to just hollow out the edges on the side here to give me a little bit more of that spoon-like handle. Once again, I'm going to do that with a bit of planing, but just a little bit more precision work here. So we're going to go just where I want it to go inwards and just shave that off. Wonderfully sharp blade. So Horace Kephart was originally actually a librarian, and I think he had some trouble with himself, and that's how he ended up in the bush and in the mountains. And he actually played a huge role in the establishment of the Great Smoky Mountain Reserve. And now that I've got my spork sort of looking how I want it from the top and from the side, I can start looking at the bottom and taking away some of this material over here. So let's do that. Take off all of this bark quite easily. So you would use planing to remove quite a bit of material, and if this knife had a 90-degree spine on it, I could use that 90-degree spine to remove some of the bark that I'm now using this method to remove. And now here's where I'm starting to get to a little bit more fine carving that's needed. So I need to sharpen that tip off just that little bit more, and I'm just not getting it done with planing. So I just want these small movements just to sharpen off that edge. I'd say that I have now gotten the general shape that I wanted. I wanted a little bit of a dip here where it rises just before you go into the bowl. This is large enough. I would have liked it to be a little bit wider. I think I took a little bit too much off of the edge there, but that's quite okay. I flattened it out here at the end just because I want to be able to manipulate my spork at that range if I am busy eating something out of an MRE packet or out of a trail packet. And from a balance perspective, this knife is actually a little bit heavier on the handle, which is fine. It's really just a throwing knife that needs to be perfectly balanced. But for this, you can see even right there just before that grip point. The handle does drop down a little bit. Even my Mueller drops down a little bit, but this is a little bit less balanced than what my Mueller is, but I do find that I've got good control over it nonetheless. What I would say I would really have preferred in the handle of this blade is if it had a little bit more swell right here where I grip it in my hand. It would just have made it a little bit more comfortable for me. Although it's not an uncomfortable knife to handle. It really is a great knife actually. And if somebody pulled this knife out of their belt, out of the sheath on their belt, I'd also be like, whoa, that's a nice knife. So I'm at the point now where I've pretty much got the shape that I wanted for the spork. All I have to do is add in my little teeth on the end here. So now we're really going to put this knife to the test and see if it can perform well with really fine carving. In order to do this, what I think is going to be the best is to baton really gently, and I'm talking about really gently here because this is old hard dry wood and not wet wood. I do actually put myself at risk here of splitting my spork. Just some gentle taps in there, and that gives me something to carve towards. So I'm really going at that really gently. Usually if you have a Swiss Army knife, you would use the saw on the blade to do this. So this is where balance and also your finger guard over here come in really handy, because it gives you that proprioceptive feedback to know exactly where that knife is in your hand, and the balance also helps with control. And in this case, I think this knife has an advantage over a knife that has a Scandi grind, because that is such a slanted flat grind there. The Scandi, which sort of has the grind up and then suddenly goes thicker, you can get into these tiny little spaces with this blade that you might not be able to do as well with a Scandi grind. If I plane this and thin it out a little bit more, I'd be able to bore through here. It would be nice to have a little hole there. So there we are. There's my spork. Doesn't look anything like my current one, but it will serve the purpose of pinning down noodles in a packet and managing to eat them with a little bit of sauce. So all in all, this has really been such a nice knife to work with, and I really have enjoyed this knife. It has been a little bit long in its sheath when I've sat down on a chair, unlike this one, or I've sat down on the ground somewhere and it has actually reached to the ground, then I've had to move it out of the way, which can be a little bit annoying. But because the sheath actually has a little bit of space that it's dangling on, I can actually move it out of the way perfectly fine. So that's been okay. The only other thing that I would possibly have asked for is a 90-degree spine, which I might actually put on anyway, just for practical purposes, being able to use it to remove bark off of branches and to start a fire with a ferro rod. Other than that, this is a really fantastic knife. Thank you once again to Marine SHTF for sending me this all the way from the States. I really appreciate it. It's been a fantastic tool to have. And if you would like to purchase one or have a look at it, I'm going to post the link for it in the description to this video, so you can go and check it out for yourself and add it to your collection of knives. Until the next time, live ready. I think we've got company in the bush. Possibly baboons.